Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Shaun Sharkey. How are you, Shaun?
I am very good, Andrew. I'm very good, thank you. It's been a bit of a manic week, but it's always good to be busy, isn't it?
Well, I know. Kind of getting time with you is a bit of a challenge because you're such a busy boy, and but you've been busy in a good way. And obviously, I'm in honor of being on this podcast episode with you today. And obviously, for all the people that are listening on Spotify and audio platforms, they're not able to see this, but actually, I am unleashing your unicorn today. So there you go. So the reason why I'm doing that is because I think it's quite a special day today, isn't it? I think there's been some quite interesting news today. You've been doing some unicorn harvesting.
Yeah, I suppose, obviously today we did the chip raise, which raised over £10 million, which was, quite special. I think this is Chip's fourth or fifth crowdfund, so they're pretty expert at it, and they come back and they always deliver and really impress people. So, always wonderful to have them on the platform.
Yeah, but it felt like a news program doing that, didn't it? It felt like you heard it here first. It's like live. So what gets you up in the morning? And what I suppose I know that we met actually before we went into that, we met actually at Google.
We did indeed.
One of Google's many offices now. It's like Google Town is London. I remember actually. The funny story was it was quite a cute story actually. So I went there. I got invited by one of my very good friends, Mr. Ash Ali, the raconteur from ex-former director, CMO of Just Eat, and he's quite a noisy boy. He's on the stage, on the mic. You couldn't get the mic off him, and then suddenly he passed it over to this other guy called Shaun. And obviously there was a bit of chat about, funding and how to fund startups and scale-ups and all that kind of stuff. And then I realised, actually, he's from Liverpool. He's from Merseyside. So it's like, what? I can't come from Yorkshire or Manchester and talk to a Scouser. But obviously, we got on, we had a good chat. And then we thought...
Well, we did, but I remember immediately, the Yorkshireman coming in, militant Scouse show, all this kind of stuff. Always nice to see another Northerner in the wild, especially one as belligerent as you.
Oh, belligerent! Okay. No, but you see, what we do is we come down from the north, to steal all the jobs in the south. Is that what you're supposed to say? Yeah, that's it. a big double-decker bus from the north.
Yeah, it's just we're a special lot, so we're in much demand, I think.
We always need a bit of character, you see, don't you? So, that's not to say anybody in the south hasn't got character, but it's just different character. So what does get you up in the morning these days? What's keeping you busy?
Yeah, I guess to put it in fairly pretentious terms, what we do at Crowdcube is we're very much operating on the frontiers of technology and I suppose culture in some ways, where we're constantly going out and speaking with startups who can potentially work with us. And some of them are 3, 4, 5 months old, operating on some hyper innovative products, and we often get the chance to speak with them really early doors. As well as later stage brands as well, like the likes of Monzo and Curve and Free Trade. So we're very lucky in that sense, I guess. And I think, from my own perspective, it's interesting because we probably at Crowdcube speak to more startups than most venture capital funds, because we deal with such a great volume and such a variety of companies. So I think that's what gets me up in the morning, just seeing new ideas, meeting very exciting founders, and kind of bringing the gospel of crowdfunding to them.
So for people who don't obviously not in this kind of area, what do you do, and what does Crowdcube do? Is Crowdcube is a company you work with?
Yeah, sure. So Crowdcube itself is we founded in 2011, world's first equity crowdfunding platform. And effectively, we enable early stage companies to attract investment from their own communities and the Crowdcube community from as little as £10. So what we did as a company, and I suppose what was so revolutionary, was that we democratised access to early stage companies as an asset class. And we've done that, really well. We've helped out over 700 companies now, helped raise over £1 billion, worked with the likes of Monzo, Revolut, Free Trade, etc. But we don't just work with that caliber of company as well. We also work with some amazing companies who are raising the first 50k check. So there's a hell of a lot of kind of variation there. In terms of what I do at Crowdcube, I guess it's split into different roles, really. On the one hand, I'm going out and I'm speaking with founders and I'm educating them and introducing them to crowdfunding, because there are a lot of moving parts with crowdfunding. There's a lot of kind of misconceptions. So I come there and I'll help educate people, and I'll also support them throughout the whole process as well. And also performing, I suppose, a form of due diligence. You get a very good sense in a role like mine for things that are going to be, investable. So that's kind of a judgment call on my side. And that's effectively what I do. And that's what Crowdcube does.
It's interesting. So it's like it's nearly having its 10th birthday.
It is, yeah.
But you're only just getting started. Yeah.
Yeah, we are. I mean, it's, we're an unusual company in the sense that we're not just a company within a space. We help invent a whole space, a whole category. Mm-hmm. And the itself is, in terms of its crowdfunding legislation and the how far its crowdfunding platforms are, we're the most advanced in the world. Not even the US does it to the extent that we do. So we're very much building an industry and operating on its frontiers as well.
And what I mean, in terms of, your take on it. I mean, obviously 2010, I remember Jackie Taylor coming on the show quite a few months ago, and she was one of the what you call it, the tech glitterati, those first 100 people in Tech City many, many years ago. And you probably know her very well. And so it sounds like it was just after that time that kind of Crowdcube was formed. And what was the trigger for that? Why did it happen? Do you know? What was the?
Yeah, so we were founded by two really great guys, two great entrepreneurs called Darren Westlake and Luke Lang, and they'd had businesses themselves. They'd been raising money for them, and on the one hand, they wanted to just simplify that whole process because 10 years ago, if you were raising money for a startup, it could be incredibly difficult to kind of coordinate more than 10, 20 investors because you'd be sending out PDFs, you'd be, cajoling a lot of people. So what Daz and Luke wanted to do was create a platform where you could do that really easily and digitally. So that was one side of it. And the other side really was, we wanted to democratize access to these companies as an asset class, because up until we came along, if you wanted to invest in a startup, it was usually the same people who had the information. It was, angel groups tended to be older gentlemen. So the demographic of people was exactly the same. And we just wanted, I suppose, to open that up. And, I think we have done that. So yeah, that was the impulse, I think.
That was the kind of trigger. So they kind of had personal experience of the problem. And it was kind of quite a closed community. Is that what you kind of say?
Yeah, I guess as well. At the time, 2010, banks weren't lending. It was difficult for early stage companies to get any form of financing. So we kind of grew out of the recession in that sense. And that's kind of when we bloomed and have continued to do so.
So you kind of the unicorn to help other unicorns. Is that what you call it?
Well, we're not there yet, but we're hopefully on the way.
Unicorn breeder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I could maybe stick that down as my title on LinkedIn. I don't know what the.
I think you should. That'd be quite like a chief unicorn breeder, CUBO officer.
Yeah, a Cubo. It would actually, brand them as it might actually.
That's right, a Cubo. Yeah, you're ahead of me. Just put your hashtag Cubo.
Yeah, it's not a bad show. That I'll have to try and put.
Hey, excuse me. It's trademarked by me now already. Yeah.
Well, it's a very fluid world. The early stage.
I'll have to sell you the domain name already. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I see you scuttling off registering that already.
Again, sorry?
I said I can see you scuttling off registering that already.
There you go. And he's back in the room. So, in terms of your personal journey, then what have you had? Have you got like a financial background, or what kind of got you involved in this kind of? Because it's quite obviously now it's kind of like you could say to your point, you created the category, or you and the team created the category. But did you were you a banker before that, or an accountant, or a lawyer, or a?
No, I suppose I had a bit of a strange trajectory. As you probably hear from the accent, I'm originally council estates in Liverpool, where I'm from. None of my family are from like a professional background or anything like that, but I had quite a steady educational rise, and ended up at Durham doing a history degree. Being frank, that the plan wasn't always to go into startups, but post university, I ended up working for one, and called Debut, which was fantastic little company with some great backers and really great people. And I just kind of fell in love with the space, and I kind of realised retrospectively that being a historian, if I can call myself that, you're actually studying innovation constantly. And at the time, I didn't really realise that, but I do now. And, startups in that sense fitted me perfectly, because what you were doing day in, day out, you were seeing the world kind of develop and build out in front of you. So I was at Debut, and I got to, funnily enough, you're in the same co-working space as Crowdcube, so I got to know a couple of people there. Super interesting space, very interesting company, and I was offered a job there, and I couldn't say no. It was a brilliant opportunity, and it's never a boring job. Very exciting.
Oh, no, exactly. And which, because I know co-working is quite popular in London. Which one was that then? What, not WeWork?
It was WeWork, and then this was when WeWork was, in the midst of its hyper expansion, and it really was. I look back on it now, and I think in 10 years, when other people start entering the tech space, I'll definitely be able to sound like an old timer and say, you weren't there when WeWork was at its height and its pomp, because it was nuts. It was so vibrant, and there's things like you could get a beer at 1:00 on a Thursday, and people genuinely were, and it very much had a bit of Wolf of Wall Street vibes to it. So it was a good laugh kind of beer, and I do kind of miss that little era, I guess.
Well, I mean, they always got the taps, haven't they? They've got the taps where you can pull your beer anyway. Well, maybe they've switched them off now, because obviously all the kind of probably SoftBank and stuff like that. But anyway.
Yeah, they've limited all. I think now you can only get like 3 beers. You can't let your friends in. But back in the day, it was unlimited. 3 people in as you like. It was. It was.
Well, you put the event on Facebook. There's 1,000 people turn up. Yeah, run out.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Miss it dearly.
So what kind of role did you do? So you did your degree in history, which obviously, I suppose I was just thinking when you were saying that, actually, was it's a bit like you're a historian, and now you're making history. Now you're making history, you're creating history. Yeah,
that's it. Well, I think when
it creates history, there you go, another hashtag. There you go.
I mean, there's so many ideas coming out of the podcast. I'll have to be quick to get them registered before you do.
No, don't worry. You're safe. So you see, you hashtags are safe. Don't worry. I've got enough.
Thank you. All right. I'll I guess with especially the history I studied tended to be. I loved modern history, and especially since the 1850s, it's very much been kind of an age of capital and innovation. And I'd always been fascinated by that. So startups and the whole kind of venture scene, suits me down to the ground. Like it quite a lot.
So what would you say? So when you actually worked in a startup yourself, then what kind of role were you doing? Were you doing growth or partnerships or finance or legal?
Yeah, It was a bit of, I mean, I suppose for a first job out of university, it was, you wear lots of different hats. So I started out as an intern, moved my way up. It was basically kind of a generic kind of commercial role. So sales, support. And the nice thing as well about the startup is often you do get kind of strategic input. And that's nice, rather than jumping on a grad scheme and kind of, not being able to have any say for 15 years. I've obviously got, being a Scouser, a bit of a big mouth. So, I like to...
No, surely not.
Exactly.
No. But I think the thing is, what I find interesting, you see, in London is there's so many different personalities, right? It's just it's a real melting pot, right, of different people, different backgrounds. But it makes the events, and when people meet each other, it makes it quite dynamic and quite alive, isn't it? So
it does. I always remember when prior to working in London, I came down once, and I was doing an internship in the summer, and I got off work at about 4:30, and then I was 19, 20, wanted to find something to do, and I just looked up events, and literally around the corner there was an event on about the Cultural Revolution in China, and it was a Liberal Democrat MP and these really high-end academics, and there was about 10 people in the room, and I just remember thinking, there's probably not another city on earth where you get that kind of caliber of conversation within a 20-minute radius just by looking on your phone once you finish work. So yeah, I agree with you. I think I love London for that fact, Yeah,
it's fascinating, isn't it? So in terms of the you mentioned a few of the kind of what you could call the London lovies of Techland, yeah?
Right. Yeah,
that's another hashtag. There you go, London lovies. And so you mentioned people like Monzo, and obviously I remember the whole thing about the golden ticket and the coral card. Oh, I've got to have a coral card. Got to have a coral. Actually, my background's pretty nearly coral. But so. What's been your observations in I know you started with your big news announcement today from Chip, which we'll come back to in a bit. But what have you seen over the time you've been with Crowdcube? Have you seen from obviously G&T, it's about growth and tech, right?
Yeah,
gifted and talented people. Which obviously for you being at Crowdcube since those early days, obviously you've obviously seen a tremendous amount of different things. Well, what are the kind of things that you've seen that you think of? Has there been a pattern, or has there been some kind of stories or things you'd share which you think are very interesting that's worth sharing with the audience?
Yeah, I think the big development in crowdfunding has been that it's transitioned from a pure form of financing to something that is a form of financing, but also a fantastic community building tool as well, because you think about it, if you're an early stage company, you don't have a huge corporate sized marketing budget, but the one advantage that you do have is that you're in incredible proximity to a customer base. And there's a lot of opportunity in that because you can build products that are very tailored to them. You can market to them in a very direct, kind of cheeky, kind of, friendly, fun way. Mm-hmm. And equity crowdfunding increasingly fits into that pattern because you can go out to your early adopters, your early customers, and you can build an army of people around the company. You can end up with 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 people as an early stage company with a moat of these supportive brand ambassadors there who you can then build the product with because they act as a test group as well. And I think that's been the most interesting thing about where crowdfunding has gone. And I think that increasingly, most startups will crowdfund because it is one of the best forms of marketing that you can do. And it can be like rocket fuel. Yeah.
And what makes you say that? So you're saying, if I'm founding a startup or I'm co-founder of a startup, and you say you want to create some runway, you want to have some balance sheet. You've gone maybe through friends and family, you've got some initial, but then are you saying is there a certain entry point you would say from a raise that you would come into a crowdfunding process? What's the minimum? What's the maximum? You know, is there a range?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really common one as well. I think that, you know, quite frankly, a company can crowdfund at any stage, depending on a few different dynamics. Just to take a step back, I suppose if you imagine yourself as an early stage consumer startup and you put the crowdfunding to one side, your marketing strategy and your early adopters will tend to be friends, family, personal connections, because it's the most inexpensive and easy way to build out a kind of nascent early stage customer base. Now, you can do exactly the same with crowdfunding there, where your early investors can be that network around you. And I always remember listening to a podcast with Tom Blomfield from Monzo, and, you know, when they started that company, he literally went out and had, you know, north of 800 meetings with various startup founders and said, look, this is what I'm building. I'd love you to be on board. And you can do the same with equity crowdfunding and integrate that in really early. And, you know, quite frankly, if I wasn't at Crowdcube and I was building a startup, it's exactly the route that I would go down. And I think, you know, every startup should really consider it when they're building the product out.
So what you're saying is but you mentioned this a certain thing as well. So are you saying that you know, because like there's B2B and B2C.
Yeah.
You mainly, the majority ones you get involved in B2C, or is it a mix? Is it?
I think early days it tended to be consumer brands that we were raising for, but increasingly we're doing a hell of a lot of B2B raises now. Very good one that comes to mind recently that I worked with was called Keg Tracker, which it's an IoT device. It's basically in kind of MVP stage. And what it does is it tacks onto beer kegs and it can measure spillage and temperature, which is really important for a brewery because, you know, it saves the stock getting spoiled or anything like that. And they ended up with, I think it was over 1,000 investors, about £500,000 raised. They're a B2B device, super early stage, but they just had a brilliant idea. People really took to it. And, you know, if you think about it now, they're going to walk away with, you know, about £500,000 in the bank and 1,000 plus people there. And as a B2B brand, that can also be really useful because imagine you want an introduction to somebody. If you've got 1,000 people there, 6 degrees of separation says that somebody will know somebody.
Yeah.
You can leverage kind of a network effect, you know.
Oh, so what you're saying is on the B2C side, you obviously you kind of it's kind of logical. You're potentially attracting actual end customers, prospects and customers to your brand. On the B2B side, you're basically building relationships that you can actually leverage then as that kind of multiplier effect of building the business as well. Yeah. And I suppose, you know, we've raised a couple of times for a company called Small Robot Company, which is a B2B agri-tech company, and they've got a lot of people from the agricultural sector bought in to that. So even if they're not direct customers themselves, you know, it's raised their brand awareness within the sector, which is, you know, hyper useful for them. So in terms, you say, I think you mentioned some interesting stats. You said it looks like it's 700 or 800 companies you've done so far. Is that right?
Around that, yeah. I'll have to dig out the exact stat, but it's in that ballpark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's if you think about where it started and where it is now, it's been a phenomenal trajectory.
So, and the thing I suppose we're probably back onto your kind of personal story, but you're saying that actually Crowdcube was the first one in the world, and it's like the largest one in the world that's done this. It literally created this phenomenon or this capability in the market. Yeah,
we were the first equity crowdfunding platform that was out there to kind of trading, and as I say, that's because the regulatory environment in the UK was fairly benign when it came to crowdfunding, whereas, say, in the US, for example, there's lots of rules around, unaccredited investors investing in unlisted companies, mainly because they're still kind of scarred by the Wall Street crash and the penny stock stuff in the 80s. So much harsher environment to try and start a platform there.
Oh, you mean the whole like Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street stuff? Yeah. Oh, really?
Exactly that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So in terms of your personal G, I mean, so I know you mentioned you were kind of at university, you went into a startup, then you went into Crowdcube. I mean, there's this concept I talk about with like peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
What would be kind of some of the kind of highs and the kind of things that worked out well and things that maybe didn't work out as well during your time in this planet so far? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I guess, I think, as I say, like the big story for me growing up was just a kind of educational trajectory. And with that, I suppose there was a lot of kind of social transitioning because, on the one hand, you start out in kind of council estates in Liverpool, and then the next minute you're at Durham, and there's black tie events on every couple of weeks. It was tricky to get there, and it was also, it's very strange if you don't grow up in that environment to kind of absorb it all and understand what's going on. So that was always like I suppose an interesting thing and fairly unique. And then I'd say, look, in terms of real difficult moments, I don't think I could say that I've had something where I felt like, okay, I've completely failed at that, or I'm still quite young, I'm 25, so there's probably a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes. But as of yet, I felt fairly comfortable with kind of what I've done, where I am. So yeah, I guess. Well,
if you're 25, actually, then I suppose you're a millennial, aren't you? Generation Y, is that right?
I think I hover between millennial and Gen Z, but I'm like a very young millennial, because some of the millennials, I think they're born early 80s as well.
Right.
But I would say that being born in 94, you did kind of grow up before the iPhone and things like that and social media.
Yeah.
So that was still familiar to me, but I do wonder what it must be like for kids who are born in 2005, and what on earth that would have been like growing up. I have no idea. And generationally, I really do feel a bit of a difference with some of them now, which is scary, I think.
Scary or what, good or not?
Yeah. What? I suppose like everyone always remembers sitting, in the nan and granddads, and your nan not being able to use a remote properly, and you'd be thinking, that will never.
Put some more batteries in. Put some new batteries.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my nan was terrible for that, but she. I remember sitting there thinking, I'll never be like that because I'll always be on top of like the tech. And now it's like I'll watch. Like I've got a little brother and sister. I've got and you watch kids on TikTok and things like that. And I'm not on those social media platforms. It's a younger person's game now, and I don't get it. There's lots I don't get anymore culturally, which I guess is. Yeah, you do start feeling a bit of a gap generationally. I'm sure you felt that a few times by now, haven't you?
It's interesting. So I was on a call this morning actually with one of it's a new mobile business that I'm getting involved in, and a new mobile brand, which I can't tell you yet, but check it out in October. You heard it here first. Right. And we were talking about different generations, and we're actually talking about kind of where people are recording TikTok videos and then posting on Facebook and posting them back on Instagram. Yeah. And then also the comment from this certain person who was in this meeting said that literally people who, because Instagram have responded by releasing Reels, the Instagram Reels capability.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
People who are TikTokers think it's so naff or so un-PC that Instagram release Reels that they're not using Instagram anymore. They're kind of like saying like last year. I'm going, what? It's amazing, really, if you think about it. The sensitivity of that.
And it is, and I actually think that a lot of people are still quite bullish on Facebook. I think that social media platforms are kind of inherently rely on network effects, and if you get people leaving a platform and it's seen as a bit naff, that sort of stuff can unravel super quickly. I think we saw it with a lot of the earlier social media platforms like Bebo and MySpace, once you lose the cred, it can unwind super quick. And I often think Facebook's quite vulnerable to that. So yeah, we'll see. But
Facebook is turning into a financial services company, isn't it? It's going to be a fintech, isn't it? So that's fine. It's going to be a bank.
I think everybody wants to be a fintech these days. But
what? So I mean, why is that? Why do you think everyone wants to be a fintech?
Well, it's similar to everybody likes to be an AI company or a blockchain company. It can sometimes be the cool thing to do, I guess. So yeah.
So is that what you're seeing? Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's been a period. I suppose I was in Silicon Valley in 2015, 2016. I was field CTO for a machine learning company, which is I suppose it wasn't early, but it was early enough. Yeah. Yeah. And now what I find is that like AI, machine learning, all those kind of topics, it's kind of like it's just, I won't say it's kind of commodity, but there's a lot of people what do you call it? It's like a standard part of the storyboard or the founder's story or something like that. And it's a bit like, how do you differentiate? Because every founder's story sounds very similar. How do you truly differentiate to be different? I don't know if you've seen that with some of the people you talk to, but some of the words seem to be kind of, there's a pattern they keep repeating. Yeah.
I guess my best mate works for a hedge fund, and he understands a lot about kind of AI. He's doing a PhD in it, and he often does say to me, like, the common usage of it, like 99% of the time across the news, across various industries, is that it's not really what people think, and it's often just being used as a bit of a buzzword. And he always stresses to me that like true kind of AI, in the sense that people currently conceptualize it, is in very, very, very early stages as of yet. So yeah, I suppose that made me a bit more jaded and skeptical with some of it. But
yeah, I mean, I had Patrick Banger on. I don't know if you saw that, but he's a VP of AI for Samsung SDS, Silicon Valley, and he he's spent a couple of decades in this space. So yeah, there's different levels of like everything, I suppose, and also this thing called, I suppose, deep learning. So there's like, as you know, so but I'm speaking to somebody who knows all these buzzwords and actually understands what they actually are. So you talk to some people, so it's not everybody understands what they actually are, and it's still pretty complex, I think.
Yeah, I'd count myself in that category. I wouldn't say I have any kind of great knowledge of how a lot of that kind of stuff operates, but
I mean, I suppose that links to the kind of the T and the G and T in terms of your, because obviously if you've done kind of like I suppose a history kind of background, which is it's incredibly useful actually, because as we said, is it? I don't know. Would you say that history repeats itself? Is that classic phrase? Is that true?
The only thing that repeats in history is the fact that people don't learn from history, and
right.
We as a society generally, I think people have very limited historical references and frameworks. I think if you can actually learn a lot if you say to somebody, if you ask them about the situation and you say, look, what does this remind you of historically? There's usually 2 or 3 kind of stock answers. One of them is almost certainly in the UK anyway, it's always World War II, which I think definitely has its uses, but as an analogy for kind of every single circumstance that we're in, it doesn't really work. And I think, that's probably why if you do study history, you end up with lots of different little frameworks, and I think you end up with quite a good sense of contingency, because history is not it's not an upward trajectory. It zigzags quite a lot, and people really can make a difference in history. There's countless examples of individuals, had they not done a certain thing, we'd almost certainly be on a different trajectory. But yeah, it would be nice if we learned a bit more from history, but we're condemned not to, I think.
So you don't think history repeats itself then?
I think circumstances and various elements can repeat. So, for example, you could have a situation at the moment, look at the various dynamics with them, and say, look, it's not too dissimilar to this thing that happened in the 19th century, but it's never a carbon copy. It's always got its own dynamics. And the other thing about history is that history is very ironic, and it loves to make fools of people. So often you think you understand and you've got a grasp, and it'll slip out your hands like sand. So
well, I suppose a quick question to giving you your domain knowledge of history is obviously a lot deeper than mine. So this thing that's been happening in 2020, is that a worldwide first in history?
No, I think prior to World War One, we had a period of globalization that wasn't as technologically advanced, but certainly you had capital moving across borders quite freely. You had a lot of migration across countries that was very similar to kind of the post 89 to 2008 period. And then similar things happened. The international supply chains kind of collapsed post World War One. I think we're not at the kind of severity of that period, because we're not having a kind of world war, but we are seeing like a resurgence in I suppose like a national consciousness, which is kind of more protective over like the nation rather than a global thing. And I suppose the other thing about that period is that of course they had a pandemic, which was the Spanish flu, and in that sense it is a bit of a freakish kind of mirror at the moment. Hopefully we end up on that trajectory, though. That would be a disaster.
Yes, yeah, I mean, I think so. For my sons who are 15 and 16, Ben and James, they.
I thought you were going to say Ben and Jerry then.
No, Ben and Jerry. Yeah, ice cream. Yeah. They eat a lot of ice cream sometimes. Right. Ben and James. Yeah, they. So they're 15 and 16. So they're kind of, I suppose, in. They're right in the kind of epicenter of that kind of digital native. Spending too much time on YouTube, spending too much time on Instagram, spending not enough time on WhatsApp, and saying to me that WhatsApp stole last year. It's that thing.
Are you always on them as the dad, kind of mithering them to get off the stuff, or?
Well, he not enough.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's also that they're incredibly. It's a bit like, it reminds me of the Matrix, where they're kind of constantly plugged in. It's literally, it's like it's either the Xbox or some kind of device. That's what I find quite staggering. Is it's a bit like, how do you break them away from that kind of environment? So I suppose sending them on a scout hike or something like that. It's a good thing into the forest. We'd know where they have to leave their iPhones at home. Yeah.
Well, I suppose a good acid test with all this kind of stuff is. I remember reading an interview with kind of Bill Gates, and he very much limited the amount of time that his kids was on stuff. I remember one of the big investors, the early investors in Facebook, Sean Parker, saying, I know how these algorithms work, and like I think they're really dangerous for people. Similarly, Steve Jobs was the same, where kids weren't on the tech that much. So. Yeah, I do think, and I personally think I'm definitely on the phone far, far too much. I hope to break the habit, but it's very difficult, isn't it, when the whole world's on there, and that's how you stay in touch with your friends and things like that at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose with this whole distributed world we're living in, exactly. Yeah, I mean, on Wednesday, a few days ago, there's that new film, The Social Dilemma, was on Netflix. I don't know if you saw that, but Joe Toscano, who wrote the book Automating Humanity, was a guest on this show about 2 years ago. He's that group that put that together. So it's probably worth watching that, because the trailer's pretty scary to me.
I'll check it out. Yeah, it sounds good.
When you realise what's happening with the data, and obviously that whole kind of piece around what then information is then presented to you.
Yeah, it's like, have you read that? Have you read the book by what's his name? Harari, the Homo Deus.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he talks a lot in there about big data and algorithms, and yeah, it is often quite frightening when you contemplate it. I remember one example he gives in that book about potentially going on a dating app and it's just kind of matching you up algorithmically. And the scary thing is, what if algorithms do know you better than you know yourself? It's kind of a bit of a joyless world if that happens, I think.
Well, yeah. I suppose that links to kind of my other question was about the tea in G&T. Yeah. So it does sound like the more, because now I suppose you're working in the kind of, I don't know if you call it tech industry. I suppose you do kind of like it's kind of like the finance and the tech industry, isn't it? I suppose you're working in.
Yeah.
So I suppose of most people, you would understand the buzzwords, but then it sounds like that you don't classify yourself as a full stack engineer or a full stack developer. It's kind of more you working in the industry, but you're not technically aware.
I'd say I have a working knowledge of it, and I certainly wouldn't like to sit here and go up against the guy from Samsung and make any claims, because I think he'd absolutely annihilate me.
Right. But I suppose so. But you obviously have an interest in it. You find it quite interesting, quite dynamic. And I suppose I suppose what I was just thinking with you explaining your background is it because of the historic implications or the future implications of some of the businesses that you're working with, they could change the future of the world, couldn't they? I suppose that's the exciting thing about what you're working on.
They kind of, I suppose like the one caveat with this is that I think technology it's fundamentally neutral. It's not good or bad, which is a nice thing to kind of dwell on, because it means then that a lot of agency is in the hands of people, and it really means that we as people have the opportunity to shape the future via this tech. And I think in that sense, the next 20, 25 years are going to be absolutely crucial, because there's some very profound tech that is being developed, and it could easily be used in a bad way, and on the other hand, it could easily be used as a massive tool of kind of liberation and poverty alleviation. So I think it's a good kind of battle to be involved with, and hopefully the good side of that can win out.
Yeah, I suppose that what I notice in the kind of the generations when you look at them now is that, and maybe you can speak from your experience as well as from your perspective and how you feel about this. But what I'm seeing is that younger people now are actually, because of all the things that have happened, with 9/11. I mean, it's literally, it's the end of 9/11 today, right? And it's obviously that happened. Then we obviously haven't had the stuff that's happened recently. And the impact of technology, for you, you're going up through your teenage years, and obviously now to where you are in your as you go into adulthood. Then I suppose from what I can say is it's changing people's perception of A, what they want to do as jobs, B, as a quote career. B, they also how their relationship with money and how they want to, what do they want to chart as their life? What's their life plan? And also, how do they give back? Is that something that you're seeing as well with other people?
I'd say, generally speaking, that very strange to have been born in the kind of early to mid 90s, I think, because as I say, you were kind of in touch with the world of the previous 50 years quite a lot, in the sense that the tech wasn't dramatically different. But I think if you're born mid-90s, you think about it, you had this kind of post-Cold War period where things were very settled and things were on the up. And then all of a sudden you had 9/11, you had the 2008 crash, you had the recession to that. And then you also had the birth of the smartphone and the I suppose the growth of the internet, and that then sprung up all of these kind of crazy dynamics that we're currently dealing with. And it's a very unusual time to live through. I don't think we necessarily have any kind of reference point in that sense, because tech has never moved as quickly as this, and we don't know what kind of effect this kind of tech will have. And I think, it's probably birthed a bit of a strange generation, and it's difficult to know what like our generation will turn out like in the end. I think, because there's also dynamics like, the lack of housing and all this kind of stuff. So, who knows? I think it's a very interesting time to live through, but the kaleidoscope is spinning, isn't it? And it's not stopped yet, so we don't really know. I mean, are we talking about funding options for early stage companies, or just generally?
If you look at 100 companies that come to talk, or 100 companies or 100 people that come to talk to you these days, what are you finding is the main pattern? Are they mainly startups or scale ups, or are they established businesses who want to incubate something and then spin something out, or is it And I suppose then, depending what type of business they are, then are they what you're seeing as a kind of the trend of what are their options? I suppose what are their funding options? Because obviously you want to presume get more and more people to do crowdfunding, but obviously if you're listening to understand there's this option plus this option plus this option, and how do you make the decision about which one's best for you? I suppose just get some guidance.
So predominantly where I deal in is equity financing effectively, but for early stage companies, there are lots of different options out there. There's obviously debt, grants are out there as well, and then obviously equity as well. So very varied, but I'd say most startups I'm dealing with, it's predominantly kind of equity raising, because I think for an early stage company, you don't really want to be taking on a load of debt, because generally speaking, they're not generating huge amounts of revenue yet, so a bit of a risky bet. So for me, predominantly equity is what I'm kind of dealing with.
So what you're saying is that the deal there is that they would trade or exchange equity for effectively creating a balance sheet for a cash injection.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah,
and in terms,
so they're bringing more shareholders into the fold and partnering up there to try and scale.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the size of the kind of the round of funding, what's the smallest and what's the largest? What are you seeing and what's the usual size of funding get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, Crowdcube will help out a company who are raising as low as a 50k check, all the way up to Monzo, who issued a prospectus and did a £20 million transaction through the platform. So we're a very, very unusual company in that sense, in that we just work across the spectrum. But for us, we love working with a company at any stage, because we just get to see so much exciting stuff, and we often get to see companies that come to us when they're doing an SEIS round and then fly off the shelf and it monstrous growth, and we get to work with them again and again. So that's, I guess, the variance that we're dealing with.
So that's quite a range from 50k to 20 million. I mean, I presume you get less £20 million deals than you do 50k ones. I presume you get more.
Yeah. So generally speaking, we're limited by the EU prospectus limit, which is about £7 million, is what we can generally go up to. A company, in theory, if it was big enough, could issue a prospectus and raise over that amount. But you're looking at 6 months of work to issue a prospectus, so it's not super nimble.
Right. Okay. So it's just kind of £7 million. You're talking like, I suppose you would call it would that be classified as a seed or to a Series A, a small Series A? Is it?
It'd be like a Series A, wouldn't it? Series A plus, I guess.
Because I suppose what I've noticed is that the size of rounds you have in, say, the Valley or New York, they're bigger than they are usually in UK and Europe. I know that's obviously going to change as it goes forward. But,
sure. I think the venture capital scene there is literally dates back to the late 40s, whereas our one is I suppose a far new kind of invention, and there's not as much money floating around yet. But I mean, it's increasingly growing, and we're getting a lot of US firms coming over as well. So yeah, I think a little trajectory will continue to rise upwards.
So when you say US firms, you mean US VCs coming over here, or people from the US getting involved in your platform?
Not on our platform necessarily, but you definitely see like US funds opening up European operations increasingly.
Okay, yeah. It was a follow-on from the Bolts and stuff, things like that. Yeah. So in terms of, in terms of the kind of, I suppose, the growth aspirations for you personally, what do you see that you would ever go back into startup land, or would you want to go on? Now you've spent time in a startup, then you've worked to help you create unicorns, harvest unicorns. Would you want to go out and do something in the we're in 2020, right? So what's the next 10 years like for Shaun Sharkey?
I guess, if you speak to anybody internally at Crowdcube, you'll know that I'm pretty kind of fanatical about the company. So for now, it's I think we've got something that can really scale and be absolutely monstrous across Europe. So for me at the minute, it's just knuckling down, helping companies fund, and helping Crowdcube develop as well, which is a fantastic company with great people, and a lot of idealistic people in there as well, which for me, I'm quite not inherently tribal, so I like the sense of belonging and mission and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you like the community or the kind of the posse or the tribe that you built at Crowdcube. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good people, great company. So yeah, I think a lot of us there are very excited about the future.
So I suppose that links to what the plans are for growing Crowdcube then. Does it mainly have to support UK businesses at the moment, or is it something that you are looking at other geographies as well? Is that part of your growth plan as well?
Yeah, so I mean, we have an office in Barcelona. Historically, the regulation in Europe has not been as kind of benign to crowdfunding as the UK's regulation. But I think it was last year the EU passed legislation to liberalise a lot of it. So hopefully you see a lot more crowdfunding platforms generally operating in Europe, and hopefully the industry will really kind of scale across the continent.
So do you see like Crowdcube like pods, or kind of like the spread of Crowdcube across the continent, or are you going to
probably better question for the top team with it, but increasingly we do international deals. Like very interesting one last year was a company called Cowboy, which creates electronic bikes. Raised close to £3 million with us, off a lot of investors. So yeah, there's appetite on the continent definitely, and I think you'll probably see us all doing a lot more work over there over the next few years.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I've noticed. If you look at the unicorn, given you can't not talk about unicorns, but I've got a Lego unicorn on my shoulder. Was if you look at the analysis of it, a lot of the unicorns are in US and China. Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously, I suppose recently with Gymshark. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Great company.
With their great progress. The guys I think they're in Birmingham, aren't they, in the Midlands? I saw a report from PitchBook the other day where, Gymshark were on the list, with all these other, big US, flying the GB flag, Union Jack.
Yeah.
So, what I've noticed obviously over the last few years is that we're always kind of under indexed, as I would call it, in the UK and Europe for this kind of, as Aileen Lee obviously quoted in 2013, the kind of unicorn factor. But I suppose what I would say is that, I would, power to the people and power to Crowdcube to go and put a GB flag over in San Francisco. And go and do it on Silicon Valley's backyard, because I think what you've done already is fantastic, isn't it? It's a really good story.
It's just trickier in the US, as I say. It's
regulation.
But I no doubt. I mean, I think if they had regulation like ours, you would have seen companies like Facebook and WeWork, and a lot of them, and Twitter. Undoubtedly, they would have crowdfunded, I think, those companies, because it would have just made so much sense in the early days, which would have been great for a lot of people, you know.
So I mean, so if you look in ones that, I mean, obviously, I suppose we go back to the story from that we started off with Simon and Chip, you know, the CEO at Chip Financial. Because one of my very good friends is Dave Kavanagh, who was the CTO there,
right?
You know, Mr. X Purple Bricks. So it was good to see that. So it sounds like but it wasn't their first crowdfunding process. You said they've done quite a few of them, haven't they?
Yeah, so they have they call their own little community kind of chipmunks, and you know they've
okay.
but they've been massive crowdfunding advocates since the start, really, and they've built up such a culture of they're very, very connected and close with that community, and that's where the crowdfunding constantly fits in. And you know, I think you often get people who've invested in Chip asking other people who are users of Chip, you know, have you invested before? So there's that kind of culture, and I think you know, they've done great, and they're a great company, and hopefully, you know, all the people there that have backed them will you know, hopefully benefit from that in the future. But it's always great to see that kind of that kind of love from a customer base for a company.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great response from the market, isn't it? It's a real vote of confidence. It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that Dave explained to me a while ago was that he said that, you know, if you think about Monzo's like the consumer bank, yeah, the challenger consumer bank. Starling, I suppose, is viewed as I know they're trying to change, but the challenger business bank, yeah, and Bowden. Yeah. And then the way it was explained to me was Chip was the kind of the savings bank, trying to get people to save money rather than spend money all the time. Is that correct? Is that what they're doing?
I suppose, you know, the ex-CTO will be able to kind of characterise the company better than me. But yeah, look, I'm a Chip user. It's helped me save a lot of money, and I think it's very good for millennials like me who, you know, as we stereotypically say, like to spend a lot of money on avocado, butties, and coffee and all that kind of stuff. It's been it's been super useful. So I'm a massive advocate for what they do.
Avocado butties, is that the latest thing they're eating in Shoreditch? Is it? Okay.
That's the I suppose like the Scouse hybrid version of it.
Okay, fried. Are they deep fried avocado butties? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You get them from the Chiffy. Not bad.
So, in terms of, I mean, this question actually is probably, you know, really, really in the bullseye actually, because of the you know, the number of people that you come across and you meet on your day-to-day kind of journey. I suppose, you know, one of the things is you know, I was calling the kind of pearls of wisdom question. So I suppose talking about, you know, what would be the kind of the advice and guidance to founders and co-founders that are listening to this episode, and you know, if they've just created their idea, they just woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and thought, aha, eureka, I know my idea now. Or I'm starting to get some traction and I want to get some capital behind me. What would be the pearls of wisdom from Lord Sharkey?
From Lord Sharkey himself, I think it would be one thing I think, and this is not just a startup problem, it's more of a European kind of cultural problem, is that I think a lot of founders and just general people in the workplace should try and get some sales training, because I think in the US, you know, there's a massive culture of people love salespeople, and, you know, it's a really appreciated skill set. I think in Europe it isn't, but actually it's absolutely integral to everything that you will do with the company, whether it be raising money, hiring people, the way that you think about marketing. And yes, sometimes I think, especially in Europe, people are quite sniffy about anything that's to do with sales, but it's such a crucial skill set. And the founders that kind of I speak with who go on and do best, you know, they're very good at articulating what it is they're doing. They know kind of the audience that they're talking to, and they're quite sensitive to that. So I think that's something I'd always stress. I'd say as well for kind of early stage companies, once you have an MVP that works, I think your focus should not necessarily be on taking a lot of money in and, you know, chucking it on Facebook spends. It should be about building movements and missions, because you're never going to outspend a major incumbent. But what you can do is you can build a little army of people, which is far more powerful if you build a gang of fanatics.
Yeah, but build some raving fans. Yeah.
Yeah. So look at things like, you know, public product roadmaps, look at community events, look at crowdfunding, look at ways in which you can operate like a guerrilla force against an incumbent. Is something that I always think startups should look to do. And I guess that ties into something else as well, which is it's a hell of a lot easier when you've got kind of a mission and sense of conviction, because if you know what it is you're trying to achieve and you really believe in it, all of these problems that you come up against you'll have a framework and a context, and you'll be able to drive towards that. So yeah, and I think, you know, if you look at the likes of like Brewdog's a great example where it's an authentic company and they're very authentic people, and people have got a sixth sense for that and they like it. You know, they don't like feeling like they're being advertised to. They like feeling part of the joke and part of the mood. So yeah.
No, so
that's the word from Lord Sharkey.
You like that? All right, okay. No, I think it's a really good point. So what you're saying is get your mission right, get your sales right. Building the product's only half the story. You've got to get your traction. Yeah, you got to start getting your traction. You got to start working out your go-to-market. And then also, I think you said about building your tribe. So, you know, find your people and cultivate those long-term relationships so that they can act as a multiplier effect. That's
it. You know, it's interesting if you think about football clubs, and I had to get a football reference in somewhere. You know, football clubs never ever fail. Even when they go bankrupt, they'll be refounded by the supporters. Reason for that is because the people around the football club or the company have an absolutely fanatic affiliation to it, and people should look at their own company in that sense. Like, how do we build a company that people love and won't left? You know.
Which football club do you support then?
I'm a Red. There's no Blues in my family.
So for people who don't understand what that code word means, it means he supports a small little team that took a long time to rebuild their team and actually win something recently.
We're talking there about the up until a couple of weeks ago, the English champions, world champions, and European champions.
But they had to get a guy called a guy from Germany to come over and help them out. He has done an amazing job.
Yeah, he's Shankly reincarnated, isn't he?
Shankly with a beard, and a baseball cap. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No. It's my oldest son Ben was very, very happy.
You're Red, yeah.
He's a Red, unfortunately, yeah. But he used to be he used to support the one in Manchester with the U after it. And,
right.
And they had a bit of a bad season, so he switched. I said, "You can't switch." Yes, so that was the year that they actually nearly won. You know, when they had Suarez there, etc. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then obviously they had a bit of a downturn after that. And I said, "You can't switch back now. You've got to stay at Liverpool." And then obviously Jurgen came, and it's all been, you know. So unfortunately, I support Man City, you see, and my youngest son supports Chelsea. So we've been some serious dynamics going on, obviously, this last season. But you know, I'm very pleased for the Reds that they finally got there, because they obviously deserved it. It took a long time to get there, but you know.
Yeah, fair. You've only got 6 more European Cups to catch up with, but...
Oh, okay. No, but I think the point, just went back to the point, I think your point about that thing about loving the company and building that. That I think that football analogy there is incredibly powerful. Actually, it's a very, very good example of how do you build something for the long term. You've got to engage the people. You've got to win the hearts and minds. You've got to build the right culture, and that goes with the founders and obviously the people that come in the early stage, and how you add to the gene pool as you suppose you build a company. But it's very interesting. It's a fascinating story. Just you sharing the story about what Crowdcube had done as well. Actually, it just shows how getting the right people together can really make something special. And it just sounds like you're a chief. You're a big. What do you call it? I was going to say a rah-rah girl. I can't say a rah-rah girl to you, kind of really. It's like, it's like, give us a C, give us an R, give us an O.
I'd say I'd count myself as a cheerleader for the company. I think, what we do and we care a lot about the companies that we deal with, and we care a lot about the founders, and we're very kind of passionate people. So I'm absolutely a cheerleader for what we do. I think it's, as I said before, fantastic company, great people.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear, and I do appreciate you coming on the show today, because I think it's been another fascinating episode, because it's also been educational. I think for the people that are listening to this episode, they can actually then they know more about you guys. They know more about what you've done. Also, some of the thinking behind it and why you do it. Why do you do it, and why does the company do it? And wish you all the best in the future with your harvesting more unicorns or decacorns.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate that, and I've really enjoyed the chat as always with you.
So, if anybody wants to get hold of you or understand more about Crowdcube, what's the best way of doing that?
So I've got email address, suppose first and foremost. So that's Shaun, SHAUN .Sharkey. So that's Shark EY at Crowdcube.
Crowdcube.com, yeah. And what about so social media? I presume is like normal kind of usual Twitter and all those kind of things. Is it?
Yeah. So me Twitter is it's a bit of a strange one. So it's SSHRKEY.
Okay. And what about Crowdcube then? Is it at Crowdcube? At Crowdcube?
Yeah, that'll be at Crowdcube, and then crowdcube.com.
Okay.
And look, if anybody's listening and they are looking to raise capital, then more than happy to have a conversation there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. That was Shaun Sharkey,
Thank you.
Chief Unicorn Harvester Officer.
Yeah. Cubo, where that was before. Yeah, I'm going to steal that.
Unicorn breeder. That's what it was. Unicorn breeder officer. And thank you for coming on the show, Shaun. This was Andrew Turner, who is the founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. So have a great day and see you soon.
Bye.